conversation after the fantastic film Welcome to Chechnya. I know there are 3 names on the screen, but we are just 2 people, as you can see. That sometimes happens. People have things happening in their lives why they can't attend, so we will do just our conversation with the fantastic Andreas Schüler from the European Center of Constitutional and Human Rights. And I maybe start with asking Andreas on his expertise on Chechnya and why he is actually on the panel. So Andreas, the ECCH is working with legal means to combat human rights violations, and you also work on Chechnya for quite a time. So what's the focus of your work and what are you doing there?
Yeah, hello everyone, and thank you very much for having us here. We come from a work on Chechnya for many, many years as human rights violations are happening there for quite a long time, first in the wars with Russia, but then also under the regime of Ramzan Kadyrov constantly, and as you could just see in the last years, specifically targeting an LGBTQ community, and that's something we also followed together with the LGBT network in Russia to see how we can address the situation outside Chechnya, outside Russia, with legal means, meaning what you just saw, the persecution of gay and others in Chechnya. You know, what can you do there from here as lawyers, but also as activists, together with the partners from the LGBT network?
What was striking for me in the film, besides the film itself, was the pre-roll afterwards. On one hand, you had many positions named anonymous. On the other hand, you really got aware of the technique of the film to protect the activists and their anonymity. So how is the safety situation of those who engage in those issues, even if they are brought outside of Chechnya?
Yeah, I mean, security is, the security situation is obviously quite terrible in Chechnya, but also in Russia, and even here in Europe, you see that the Chechen community is under extremely close surveillance by Kadyrov's people, which travel back and forth between Chechnya and countries here, including Germany. So everyone who's being brought out of the country still lives under immense fear and pressure to be found within the community, which is not that big, of course, the Chechen community. And I think the film here shows using this technique of changing the faces, having face doubles and voice doubles. I think it's quite remarkable how they did it technically, and that you can watch the film with the people without seeing their face, basically. But it also shows that it's absolutely necessary to protect those people, because otherwise they will be basically attacked wherever they are found. And of course, it would be quite dangerous to be part of this movie. So that's a problem we face, extremely dense security situation. On the other hand, you want to do something to address those crimes, and there you need to find your way between protection on the one hand, but also trying to do something to enforce the rights that have been seriously violated here for many, many people.
So before I open up the discussion to the audience, one more question from my side. How legally, as ECCHI is a legal organization, how can you in Germany support them in their fight for justice? So what's the tools and the mechanism that can be used in a legal way to support the LGBTI community and activists?
I mean, we are observing the situation of LGBTIQ discrimination for a long time in many different countries. But as we are specialized on international crimes, so torture, war crimes, crimes against humanity, we were also trying to identify a situation where discrimination is even as worse that it turns into an international crime from a legal perspective. And the situation against LGBTQI in Chechnya, I think you can simply call a crime against humanity, what it's meant for. So that's a case we brought in Germany because some of the perpetrators are coming to Germany and traveling back and forth, and we demand arrest warrants against them so that they can't travel freely anymore. But it's a hard legal fight also here, together with the LGBT network, together with survivors of the situation, because at the moment the German federal prosecutor doesn't see it as a crime against humanity. It's a number of crimes such as torture and so on, but not in this systematic scale that you need, which we think it's completely wrong, because if you see what's happening, there is systematic, it's targeted against a specific group because of their sexual orientation, and that's certainly something that also needs to be addressed with international criminal law, and the principle of universal jurisdiction allows basically globally to pursue those cases and to go against those responsible for those crimes.
So there is the microphone. Please feel free to ask questions. If you're very welcome and very invited to do so. Yeah, there comes maybe a question. We wait for that. Thank you so much.
My question would be, the film said that Canada took in refugees from Chechnya, the US didn't. Do you know if Germany is taking in refugees and how hard it is for them to gain asylum in Germany, and what the German government does addressing Russia, especially when we are cooperating with them in so many political and economic sectors, if they are trying to basically stop what's happening there? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a really great question, of course, and a pretty obvious one. Germany took a number of people, but overall it's extremely difficult for people from Chechnya to get asylum in Germany, to be to have a safe status here. This contributes, of course, to their insecure situation, being here and being in a community that is watching them, basically. So the situation as such is extremely difficult, because I think many people from Chechnya are first seen as potential violent actors or terrorism related. So the German security forces have a keen eye on the Chechen community, and it's extremely difficult for individuals there to kind of separate themselves from what's the general view on Chechnya here, especially by the German security forces, the police, secret services, and so on. So it's difficult. Germany took a few, some other European countries as well. But overall, the situation exactly for those in Chechnya who are in opposition to the regime, be it LGBTQI or also other people, have quite some problems to get a safe legal status here, but also to basically rebuild their life or live on here, because the Chechen community is watching them quite closely. So. If you follow the situation in Chechnya for many years, it's unbelievable what's happening there in terms of human rights violations all the time. So that's the next wave, basically, which we have here. It's part of Russia, it's part of the Council of Europe, it's part under the European Convention on Human Rights, and that's happening in this part of Europe, basically, and for many years, and nothing is really changing. So I think that's something that continuously would need to be addressed. But of course, the German government has other interests with the Russian Federation. There are many different issues, so Chechnya is often not in the forefront, or then only when it comes to terrorism-related talks, and there it could get even worse, because then in times, Germany is also supporting Russia when it comes to Chechnya and deporting people because of terrorism suspicion. So it's a circle that certainly doesn't improve the situation for the people in Chechnya and the extremely violent regime there.
I know that you are a lawyer, but maybe you still have an answer for that question. So how could the civil society in Germany, for example, put pressure on the government so that they would like rethink their approach and maybe take more in of those activists and of those who are persecuted? And at the same time, how would you say, so which kind of action would Germany need to take in order to put more pressure on Chechnya?
Well, I think what can be done and should be done from here is first make the situation more visible. So for that, the film is extremely important because many people don't really know what's happening there. You hear it maybe here and there, but it's really kind of unknown because so many things are happening there, and everything related to Ramzan Kadyrov is nothing new because it's repeating all the time. I mean, interestingly, US President Biden just mentioned LGBT persecution in Chechnya in his UN General Assembly speech, so it's a topic also on this high political level, but here it's not known enough. I think everyone who supports the LGBT community should speak up also for people in Chechnya or from Chechnya that are outside the country now, vis-a-vis their own governments, also here to demand that, of course, there's more protection offered by Germany, but also that investigations and prosecution starts because the perpetrators are traveling mostly freely. I mean, Kadyrov is not coming to Europe anymore because he knows that he would probably face some legal problems, but all the others around him are still traveling, and I think there could be also a judicial response to that because you have jurisdiction here for those crimes and you can investigate it and try to get the people, or at least through that maybe protect those who made it here a bit better from the community that is and the connection back to Chechnya.
Are there more questions from the audience? Otherwise, I would have 3 more, but please really feel free to use the mic. So maybe it's a bit off the topic of the film, but I think it's important to contextualize what you just said. In terms of putting legal pressure up, how does it work? How do you use the opportunity to file complaints if someone enters Europe, and which impact has that for the activists on the ground? For example, how would it impact, which impact would it have in Chechnya if they would start investigating in Germany and seeing it as a crime against humanity?
Yeah, I think here, I mean, if you take this situation and you ask yourself, what can we do from here? I mean, there's been quite a bit we did with the LGBT network in Russia, with survivors who came to Europe, you know, to speak to them, to see what is their strategy. Maybe once they're settled here, then they can take up legal steps to claim their rights, not only to, you know, defend themselves or try to get asylum, but really to take the law into their hands and go against their perpetrators. So I think that's extremely important, and that's something we can support here. And on the other hand, I think what's needed is to use the law, and there are a lot of possibilities. Often it depends on the political will in those cases. But any step in that direction would certainly break the circle of impunity which you have in Chechnya, and that's why people feel, also from the perpetrator side, feel so secure that they can do whatever they want in Chechnya, and they can travel around the world as nothing would have happened there because it's invisible, it's not connected, no one is following up that really from a legal perspective. I mean, there are a lot of reports from the OSCE, from the Council of Europe on the situation, more for like human rights reports, but not so much of such legal action. And to break the cycle of impunity, investigations would be needed. It's possible, evidence is here, witnesses are here, but there needs to be the political will to start that. And I think this political will can be created by showing such movies, by taking some action, also with Amnesty International and others. So I think there's a lot that can be done to push for that. And if there's a huge solidarity with the LGBTQI community, which is great. If you saw the debate with Hungary and having stadiums in different in the rainbow color flags and all that, I think if you transpose or extend that to the situation in Chechnya, much more can be done from a community point of view and effort to just demand more and to demand justice here, because that's way beyond discrimination. What we're talking about here, it's about crimes against humanity.
That just gave me an amazing keyword. As I said before the film, there is a petition by Amnesty International out there. We put it quite over the room, so you can have a look into it, and if you feel like it, sign it. We see in Europe that more and more countries start to target the LGBTI community, not just Chechnya, you also mentioned Hungary, but in particular Poland. So my question would be, I don't have the feeling that the EU as such or individual governments in Europe are really putting sanctions out there because of the targeting of the community. Do you think that if we need a stronger point from the EU on supporting LGBTI activists, and how could a reaction from the EU to countries who are within the Council of Europe look like to put more pressure on them? So what would be like the political tools next to the legal tools?
Well, I think the LGBTQI movement, they came a long way and a quite successful one in terms of where they are today in 2021. But of course, there's still a lot of discrimination and attacks on them. And they need to be addressed through, strong laws, political support, visibility, at all levels, and I think some reactions also of the broader public in the recent months or years give some hope that the society grow and accepts LGBTQI, and I think that's extremely important. Politics need to follow that basically on EU level in Germany. Make it stronger in bilateral talks, specifically with those countries like in Poland, like in Hungary, like in Russia. If there's discrimination, more obvious or less obvious, it needs to be addressed, pointed out, and there need to be a really clear stance that that this is unacceptable and needs to stop immediately.
And in terms, that's my last question for today, if there are no more from the audience, in the sense of supporting the activists who left Chechnya and are now in Germany, in particular protecting their safety, what would be measurements that A, we as a society could do, and B, the German government, where should they step in?
Well, I think from the side of the authorities, it's important that those people get a safe status here and access to support, be it psychosocial support or other forms of support to kind of re-establish their life here or continue to live their life here, because they come, as you could see, from extremely traumatic experiences, breaking up with families, leaving their communities, and are kind of stranded here. So there needs to be all the support possible. And again, I think from the society, it needs acknowledgement, listening to the stories of those people, and then again demanding also from the government here that there's a strong protection, and that also this situation there does not goes with impunity, but that there's a strong political and legal reaction to the persecution of LGBTQI in the Chechen Republic.
Perfect. So I get 3 concrete things that I can do. First of all, I'm not German, but I can do that in Austria, like ask my government to act on it, or the MP of my community. Second of all, we can talk more about it and share content about the issue. So in that sense, you can recommend the film. I think that it's a very strong and very important film, and it's online with us until October 3rd, but I'm sure it will be published shortly after that as well. And we need to speak up and be loud about issues like that and show international solidarity. So thank you so much for these 3 inspiring points. And thank you too much for this lovely audience. From a very personal and emotional way, it was wonderful to have in this last screening so many people attending. Thank you so much, and have a lovely rest of the weekend.